Before we start the session, there are a few housekeeping items I would like to cover. The first of which is if you would like to make a public comment during this meeting, we will prompt you at the appropriate time in the agenda to virtually raise your hand. If you are viewing the meeting on your computer, first make sure to click Join Audio. You can then raise your hand virtually by clicking the Participants button at the bottom of your screen and then the Raise Hand button at the bottom right of your screen. If you dialed into the meeting from your touchtone phone, you can raise your hand virtually by dialing *9. Once we get to the public comment section on the agenda, we will unmute participants with raised hands one at a time. The chat feature on this Zoom meeting is available only as technical support for users on their computer or smartphone. If you are experiencing technical issues with audio or video during the meeting, submit a comment in the chat feature and our IT manager will help you troubleshoot. The audio and video of this meeting is being recorded. I'm going to repeat that. The audio and video of this meeting is being recorded. A link to the video will be posted to WCRoads.org in the coming days. Today's meeting agenda is posted on WCRoads.org, and there is a link available in the chat if you are joining us from your computer. With that, I will call the meeting to order. And we will start the meeting with a roll call. Since it's virtual, we will start the meeting with a roll call for attendance. Currently speaking is the chairman of this meeting, Doug Fuller. I'm speaking from Scioto Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan. Vice Chair Barb Fuller.
This is Barb Fuller participating from Sharon Township virtually in the area of Manchester, Sharon Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Rod Green. Is not with us at the moment. Gloria Yamas.
This is Gloria Yamas participating virtually in Pittsfield Township in Washtenaw County.
Joanne McCullum.
Present. I'm participating from Ypsilanti Township, Washtenaw County, virtually.
Our Managing Director, Cheryl.
Present.
Our county's Highway Engineer, Matt McDonnell.
Here.
Our Director of Operations, Jim Harmon.
Present, Mr. Chair.
And Director of Finance and IT, Mr. Ackerman.
Morning, Doug. I'm here.
Thank you. Wonderful. We have now come to public comment. If you would like to make a public comment, please virtually raise your hand now. If you are viewing the meeting on your computer, first make sure to click Join Audio. You can then raise your hand by clicking the Participants button at the bottom of your screen and then the Raise Hand button at the bottom right of your screen. If you dialed into the meeting from your touch-tone phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. The meeting host will unmute participants with raised hands one at a time. The host will announce your username or last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. As with all of our meetings, this is the time to receive comments from the public. This is not intended to be a period for dialogue. Each person will be allocated 3 minutes to address the board. Emily, do we have any people waiting to speak to us this morning?
At this time, Commissioner, we do not have anyone with a raised hand. We do have Commissioner Green with us though now.
Good morning.
Commissioner Green.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
And you're attending virtually from where?
From Superior Township in the great county of Washtenaw.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
With that, I believe we're ready to move into our agenda. And that begins with the McChrysip Supreme Court Appeal amicus brief presentation. We've asked Dorothy Pohl, P-O-H-L, Pohl, to join us as she is, how do I want to phrase this, as well educated on the ins and outs of this as it's possible to be. Dorothy, what is it that you would like us to do today?
Good morning, Doug. Good morning, board members. Nice to be with you today. McChrysip is the insurance pool for your property liability insurances and has been around since the mid-'80s. Was created by and for road commissions because we couldn't buy insurance anyplace else. And it began when road commissions pulled together to make that happen, make insurance happen. And it started with a set of bylaws. And over the years, those bylaws have been pretty much unchanged. A couple changes here and there that the members vote on, but they've been the same. This issue relates to changes or requested changes as a result of counties that have taken over their road commissions and basically become the road commission. Those counties felt that they were should get the refunds and should be members of the pool, even though the pool was created by and for road commissions. They sued in circuit court in Ingham County, and at the circuit court level, we won the suit. Circuit court said, no, they shouldn't be members. And the bylaws state who can be a member. The bylaws say who can have refunds. So it was pretty clear. The case went to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals overturned that decision. It went back and then went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court sent it back to the Court of Appeals and said, no, you need to look at this a little bit differently. The Court of Appeals did, but it still is not a good decision. So we've appealed to the Supreme Court, asking them to look at this and let our bylaws stay, not let the judges change those bylaws to allow other members besides road commissions in the pool. In that letter from the Supreme Court, when they remanded that back and indicated they would take the appeal, they specifically asked for road commissions to join the amicus brief or to join in on what it is we were looking for. And they don't normally do that. So it's a sign, I think, that they want to look at this, they want to get it right. They don't really want to completely, as we call it, trash our bylaws to really mean it's hard to have a pool if you don't have homogeneous members that do the same thing. It would be very difficult to have a pool if you could jump in and out, 1 year in, next year out, 1 year in. And so we're looking to put that amicus brief together. There's 76 members of the pool that are road commissions. And so far I've gotten the resolution from 15 of them. I'm expecting quite a few this week because meetings are scheduled this week. But we're looking for you to participate in this as a road commission member of the pool. And I try to answer any questions you might have on it.
Dorothy, it might be useful to briefly sketch out the premise of the original Ingham County lawsuit, which has to do with the fact that if you're not a member of the pool, then you, by the bylaws that everybody signed up for when they joined the pool, the bylaws do not allow for refunds. And as my fellow commissioners are aware, the McChrysip pool, as well as the McChrysip pool, which does our workman's compensation under similar circumstances. It's a pool of road commissions. don't allow for non-members to receive refunds for funds that they paid into when they were members. That, Dorothy, am I stating that roughly correctly?
Yes, you are, Doug. The pool takes in contributions and provides the services, works the lawsuits, etc. And then if there's money left over, once the years are completed, gives back what it hasn't spent. That's one of the benefits of membership in the pool. An insurance company wouldn't give you that. And so the bylaws were written and everybody agreed to when they started that if you left the pool, you lost any refunds you were allowed or you may be able to get. And if you joined back again, you still, for the time you were gone, you didn't get those refunds, because in order to keep a pool together and collect enough money and have the right reserves, etc., you have to have a group that stays together. So you can't have them jumping in and out, which was the purpose of that. And over the years, there have been 2 or 3 road commissions that have left the pool and suffered basically not getting refunds for that. And we just felt in the Ingham Jackson Calhoun lawsuit that you can't leave the pool. And if you leave the pool, that's the consequence. And again, everybody signed up for that at the beginning.
So my idea here is Dorothy, who used to be the managing director of Ionia County Road Commission, and was active in road commission activities when the pool was first started. So if we have questions, this would be a really good time to ask. We will be discussing this during our regular meeting before taking action this afternoon. So there's plenty of time for further discussion. But this, if you have questions about how this came to this point, this would be a really good time to ask.
Chair Fuller, I have a question for Dorothy.
Please.
Dorothy, what exactly, why are they saying they feel they needed a refund when they signed and they knew they were not going to get one if they dropped out? Do they have more of an explanation as to why they think they're owed a refund?
The counties that have taken over their road commissions, their argument is that basically they're the successor in interest to the road commission. And therefore, they're entitled to anything that the road commission had. So that's their legal argument. The circuit court did not agree with that. The appeals court did agree with it. And now it'll be up to the Supreme Court to decide if that is true or not. And the reason why we're continuing to appeal it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to emphasize something here. The McChrysip board, of which, as you all know, I'm a member, has argued with itself since this has been going on now. Dorothy, help me out here. Has it been 3 years that we've been dealing with this mess?
Actually, I think it's longer, Doug. I think it was in 2014.
Okay. Oh my word. Okay. Time flies when you're having fun. Basically they want their cake and to eat it as well. They knew full well what was going to happen when they took over their road commission, and they decided that they wanted the benefit of being a pool member without being a pool member. So that's where it is. The part that was conflicting for the board was, is this something, where do our members want us to be? And the membership repeatedly told us to go forward with defending ourselves against the lawsuits initially it was Ingham County. They were then joined by Jackson County when Jackson County did the same thing. Our board did not just, this was not a knee-jerk reaction. This was something that we talked about at great length. And the other members of the pool, meaning the road commissions that did not withdraw for whatever set of reasons, are adamant about defending our bylaws. They were created for a reason, and they think our members believe that those reasons are still valid. So here we are. As Dorothy says, it's rare for the Supreme Court in their order dated September the 23rd of this year, the boards of county road commissioners and the government law and insurance law sections of the State Bar of Michigan are invited to file briefs amicus. Other persons or groups interested in the determination of the issues presented in this case may move the court for permission to file briefs amicus as well. So, as Dorothy pointed out, this is extremely rare for the Supreme Court to ask people to involve themselves, so the Supreme Court is aware of everybody's opinions. So, are there other commissioners that would like to ask Dorothy a question?
So Dorothy, the bylaws as they state right now, you can only be a member of the pool if you are in fact a road commission. Is that correct or no?
That is correct. Although, not to get into the weeds, we have one member who is a sewer authority in Bay County, but they have been a member of the pool since the very beginning, and their road commission was in charge of that at that time. But otherwise, it is all road commissions and has always been all road commissions.
Okay. So if a county were to opt out, not opt out, if a county were to dissolve their road commission and take on that responsibility themselves, they could not be a part of the pool, correct?
Correct. They cannot be a member of the pool.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Through the chair, Doug, I thought, did we not do something where the pool was considering people who were not road commissions who wanted to join the pool?
That's true, and that's in the future. But yes, we did, and that's under some very clear, specific circumstances. But that does not affect
this situation,
the issues in this particular case. But
okay.
Yes, Gloria, you're absolutely correct. We did.
Okay, so that was the only thing that was confusing me, but I knew that it was something that had not happened.
Right.
All right. So I think it is unusual. So if we were to join this amicus brief, would we be asking our attorney in every county to join, or are we joining via name only?
We're joining, the pool itself has asked a specific law firm to file the brief, who has been representing the pool in front of the Supreme Court in this matter. So right. What we would be doing would be joining the brief being prepared by Hen Lestritz, which is the name of the firm in question.
So, and then my question would, I guess, would be to Cheryl and or through you, would our attorney be reviewing that amicus brief prior to us joining, or are we going to just give a blanket, approval now?
What's being asked, I believe, Gloria, would not involve our own corporate counsel. It would be allowing the pool's attorneys in this matter, Hen Lestritz, to prepare the amicus brief. It would certainly come to us, but it would not come to us for approval again. It would come to us as information that this is what's taking place.
Okay.
Dorothy, is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may also offer, we have worked with Bill Hen in the past and have
all the confidence in the world in him and his firm. So I believe we will be happy with what we receive as part of this.
Yeah, because this is the spirit of it at any rate, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
So are they asking for a resolution on our end or something more than that?
They're asking for a resolution, which is, as I said, we will be dealing with during the regular board meeting this afternoon under action items.
That's what I thought. Okay. All right. Thank you.
And staff did prepare a draft resolution. It's on page 25 of the packet. If you'd like to take a look at it. We did not make a recommendation. We simply prepared it so that the board could go either way with it.
Okay.
Thank you, Cheryl. In the interest of Dorothy's time and ours as well, as we have a long agenda this morning, if nobody else has further questions for Dorothy, I suggest that we let her go on about her business with our thanks, and that we would move on our agenda to the SAW grant. Is everybody okay? Barb, do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'd like to thank Dorothy for her time and efforts this morning. And tell your chauffeur that it's now breakfast time.
I'll try. Thanks again for your consideration, and I appreciate being able to talk with you.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Dorothy. And I'll give you a copy of the resolution when it's passed this afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Okay, Cheryl, do you want to lead us into the SAW grant presentation?
Sure, I'll do a very brief introduction and then I'll turn it over to Matt McDonnell, since he's been sort of leading this effort with our consultants, HRC, as well as Alan Squire, our GIS developer, who've really been the staff who have been intimately involved. So several years ago, well, actually many years ago, we wrote a grant application for basically the opportunity to develop a stormwater asset management plan. And we were awarded, I think, year 5 funding in order to do to develop the plan. So it was a very significant grant that we received from what was then the DEQ, now EGLE. And so it's been a lot of effort over the last couple of years as we've been putting this together. So we thought it was a good opportunity to share what we have before we do the final submittal to EGLE, which will be later on this month. So with that, Matt, if I may turn it over to you.
I have a question. What does HRC stand for?
Hubble, Roth, and Clark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I will go ahead and just turn it right over to HRC and Karen Stickle, who is here, who is the project manager and manages through this grant. It's been over a couple of years now, and we're finalizing it this month. And go ahead and start the presentation. I'll jump in here as part of the presentation as well.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Cheryl, and thanks commissioners for having us today. My name's Karen Stickle. I'm from HRC. I've been the project manager for this. I also have with me today Jim Miller, who's our GIS specialist. So I'll be turning it over to him for a brief moment during this presentation as well to go through some of the GIS accomplishments as part of this grant. So, as Cheryl said, this is part of an EGLE, Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy grant program that started back in 2013. Back in 2013, they took applications for the SAW grant. SAW stands for Stormwater, Asset Management, and Wastewater. And this was to do and the grant you got was to do asset management on your stormwater system. So it's just covering the stormwater system, the pipes and the structures that make up that. It was developed to assist communities in developing plans for the long-term management of stormwater systems and other utilities. And it provided 75 to 90% grant funding for asset management tasks. So it was 90% of the first $1 million and 75% of anything above $1 million. So all in all, your total program was $1.5 million with a local match of $208,000 approximately. So because you only had the storm system and don't own a sanitary system, we focused on the storm. So as Cheryl said, the application was made back in December of 2013. Some of you may recall that. I know there's some newer commissioners too that probably weren't part of that. So it's been a long time coming. There was about $450 million available, and they got about $600 million worth of applications, and they ended up splitting it out over a 5-year program. And the Road Commission was in the final year of that, which ended up being very good for the Road Commission because there were a lot of lessons learned through the program through the first few years that you guys were able to take advantage of. The funding was provided in the fall of 2017, and there's 3 years to complete the program, so everything is due by December 31st of this year. The reason they did this for stormwater is because stormwater funding has been historically low, and this is one of the largest programs for this type of work in recent history. Basically, EGLE wants communities to understand what they have to plan for, for the long-term maintenance of their utilities. And one nice thing about this grant is, although you did not receive it until 2017, any costs going back to January 2nd of 2013 were grant eligible. So you started the culvert inventory with Great Lakes Engineering prior to that, and we're able to get reimbursed for that. I can turn it over to Matt if he has any specific comments he wants to make about the culvert program.
Sure. Could you advance to the next slide?
Oh, sorry. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, so very unique grant whereby we apply for something in 2013, and yet we did not receive the award until 2017, but we were eligible to get reimbursed under the grant for all efforts between 2013 and 2017. And as you may be aware, we invested heavily in GIS and just understanding really our culverts was a big priority. And that was a result of a couple of failures on primary and local roads where we really need to get our arms around. Instead of firefighting, we're doing getting a handle on the condition and then doing more planning rather than being reactive. We've done a great job of really investing in our culvert system over the last 5 years and have made a lot of progress. Both the operations department and engineering department are working very collaboratively, either doing the work ourselves or contracting out, but none of the replacement was eligible, but all the effort for planning and evaluating and getting ratings on all of our culverts. So we did both that with our own staff, and Great Lakes Engineering assisted us as well in doing culvert inspections. And so all that effort was eligible under this grant and is included in our stormwater asset management plan. Okay.
Matt,
yeah. Any questions on that?
I'd like to put some additional information before my fellow commissioners. If you go back in time, 10 years or so, this commission was not doing as good a job as it should have been doing, I don't personally think, in its asset management. That having been said, that is in some part driven by the fact that when there is not enough money, one is not sure anyway, going into any one given winter, for example, we're never sure, and you look at 2008, 2009, 2006, it wasn't clear to the board that we had enough money to do the things that we absolutely have to do, let alone do things like asset management. So in an effort to ensure that we had funds available to do the absolutely required minimum things that the road commission is required to do, we kept pulling in to our absolute core undisputed responsibilities, and worrying about whether a particular culvert was in good shape, bad shape, going to fail next year or in 10 years really wasn't on anybody's particular radar screen. So it's only when there were more assets available and the board decided that it was time to start looking beyond the end of our nose that we started this program. And so that's when we started this effort, which has been, I think, been rewarded with success. So with that as background, I'll shut up. Thanks.
No, I appreciate that, Doug. The board and senior management really took on asset management and ultimately created a position for GIS analysts, and that's Alan Squire. And Alan has been a tremendous asset himself and a great resource for everyone at the Road Commission to really embrace all the ideas and principles of asset management, understanding what you have, having being fiscally constrained and prioritizing. And that's really the heart of this stormwater asset management plan. We did a great job of understanding certainly our pavements, our bridges, and then enhance that with our culverts. But then what this plan really does is help us understand what's under the ground and in the form of structures, drainage structures, catch basin, inlets, storm sewer pipe, and we'll get to the presentation back here. So I'll turn it back over to Karen.
Thanks, Matt.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say something about this. I started in May of this year on the board, and I'm very impressed with how the county, the road commission does things, especially with the culverts. And to know that it takes, it was several years prior to this time to put in all the effort and work to make it come to fruition is very good planning and thoughtfulness. So I just want to say, good job, well done.
I'd also like to comment that it's been the technological innovations that has actually made this possible to go from flat files with paper documentation of culverts and so forth that even made this whole effort possible. It's an incredible amount of work that Alan Squire has done. It's amazingly useful, but to think that we couldn't have done this without the technology that's available now and the investment that was made in being able to utilize this technology was something that I remember way back. Doug was an advocate for this, to get on board and get these things inventoried, and where are they, and do we even know where they all are? And once we find one, let's put it somewhere where we can dig it up again, figuratively speaking, not literally. So this is just a real tribute to Doug's foresight and the board's willingness to make these kinds of investments in technology. But also we need to remember, we didn't always have this type of technology available. For those of us that can remember bag phones, which we thought were just the cat's meow. Thank you, Joanne. We just need to remember that it's not that we were dragging our feet or not being willing to do it. We really didn't have the tools to do what we're doing today. So compliments to Doug for his vision on this, compliments to staff for embracing it and making it work. And thanks to Eagle for the money to get it done.
Yeah, it's a great story to tell, and credit to our board and supportive staff, because we embarked on that journey before even knowing we got the award. And that's the great part. We got a tremendous amount of work done ahead of the grant, and then we're able to capitalize and keep that energy moving forward with the grant.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing that you did, Matt, and that was that I was incredibly proud of staff, because I vividly remember a combine going through the road, through the structure on Arcona Road, and that then shortly followed with Hack Road, and an immediate closure. And that's just not a good feeling of what exactly do we have underground. They're not as nearly as visible as the pavements or even our gravel system. When you're talking, whether it's our culverts or you're talking our stormwater system. And so it was at that point in time when this board said, we need to quantify, we need to figure out exactly what we do have. And you're right, Barb. I mean, we've got tools available now for that we didn't have previously, but we were not any different than any other organization. So this was never an attempt to criticize or to make us as an organization feel bad or like we hadn't been doing our jobs. Like most transportation agencies, we've been underfunded for decades, and we were just finally saying, you know what, we need to figure out what we have so that we can plan with those very few precious dollars that we have available to us. How are we going to spend our money, knowing that we potentially have assets that need to either be rehabilitated or replaced? But until you figure out what assets you have, you can't even make intelligent decisions. So it was back in 2014, 2015, whenever it was that combine went through that culvert, that we said, okay, we really need to take a look at this. And we did. We started ahead of knowing we hadn't had any funding available for it. So it's kind of nice that we've been able to recapture some of those costs, and that this board did have the foresight to be able to understand the importance of that and to be able to put it into our planning. And then it was very nice when we found out that year 5 that we were funded. And like Karen said, actually now we've taken advantage of what everybody has done ahead of us so that we could really hit the ground running and benefit from what some of the other communities had to spend money trying to figure out. So I think with that, if we could turn it back over, that would be wonderful.
Thanks, Cheryl. I do want to say HRC has done quite a few of these SAW grants, and Cheryl is right that many communities, especially on the stormwater side, don't have any information. So when we started off working with your staff on this, you were ahead of the curve as it relates to a lot of other communities with their stormwater, because you had started that process. You did have the technology in place, you did have the staffing in place, and it really made our job a lot easier, because we have a lot of communities that we walked into and they just had no information at all, because there has been such little funding for stormwater in the past. So we've talked a lot about asset management, so I just wanted to show this brief graph and talk a little bit about what is asset management. And asset management is really understanding the long-term needs of your system and how to manage your system at the highest level of service possible and the lowest possible cost, so that you are planning amongst all different categories and you're not going in and digging up a storm sewer or replacing a road and then 2 years later having to come up and dig up a storm sewer. That's the last thing anybody wants to see. So it's really kind of comprehensive planning of your system. And I just also want to point out that, well, we will be providing a report at the end of this grant because Eagle is requiring it to be available. Asset management is not about the report that sits on the shelf. It's really about the active data and the living data that's in your GIS and is going to continually updated over time and continually improved over time. So I think we've already touched on this a little bit, and the main questions that we ask for asset management is, what do I have and where is it located? You guys were already well on your way to doing that when we got involved. What is it worth? What condition is it in? How critical is it? And what is its risk of failure? A failure of a storm sewer under Jackson Road is probably going to have more of an impact than a failure of a storm sewer under a subdivision street. So we look at that and the criticality of each asset. And then what needs to be done to it and how will I pay for it? So it's looking at those types of questions. And as part of the county's grant, we focused on, for a lot of it, the 5 townships in the urbanized area. Due to the size of the county, the $1.5 million was not enough to look at every single asset that you guys have. So we focused on those 5 townships. And then the rural portion of the county was focused more on in the culvert inspections that were done. So we did hit the urban areas and the rural areas.
And Karen, just to piggyback on that, it was urban areas and primary roads only. We have a tremendous amount of stormwater assets on the local system, but again, as Karen described, there's only so much we can do with this grant, and we really prioritize as primary roads, urban area.
That's correct. It was the primary road. So this shows a map of the areas that we really focused on. The black line is the urbanized area boundary, and that's what's covered under part of your MS4 permit, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. Taking a little step back, we just wanted to go through some of the basics of what is in your stormwater system and some of the assets that we were looking at as part of this grant. The first thing we have storm manholes and we have catch basins. So storm manholes are used to access the storm pipe. They generally have solid covers, so surface water can't necessarily get into them, but it's so you can take that cover off, get down into the pipe system and do any maintenance that you need onto it from the surface. And then the catch basins are what you're going to see along the side of the road with the open grate, and that's what's picking up the drainage from the roadway to convey to the storm system. And this manhole here is located on Jackson Road, and the catch basin is the corner of Plymouth and Dixboro Road. So these are some assets in your county. Then culverts, you have quite a few culverts, and we've talked about that a lot, and you guys have made a lot of progress on identifying those. These are pipes that are open-ended at both ends and generally convey open water, storm water underneath a roadway, railroad tracks, or some other blockage. This is near the corner of Dixboro and Warren Road. So outfalls are areas where the storm sewer system discharges into an open channel, a river, a stream, or a pond. And this is just an end section shown where a storm sewer system is discharging. Storm scepter, and this is kind of a newer thing that you guys are putting into your system. This is a structure that filters out heavy debris so that it doesn't get into the open waterways, into the rivers and streams, and helps clean up those open channels of flow. So the water goes in and settles out the heavy debris, and then they need to be cleaned out occasionally. This one is located at Jackson and Zeeb Road. And then the last part is a storm sewer pipe, and these are the underground pipes that actually convey the water from point A to point B. So. And then next I want to talk about your MS4 permit and your MS4 compliance. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with MS4 or has heard about MS4, but all urban areas within the state are required to have a municipal separate storm sewer permit. So that's what MS4 stands for, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. The program is run through EGLE for all storm sewers that discharge into the waters of the state. And the goal is to reduce the discharge of pollutants from the storm sewer system. So this SAW program was really asset inventory for your entire system. Again, focusing on the primary roads in the urbanized areas. However, there were tasks we were able to complete as part of this SAW grant that were paid for by the SAW grant that meet your regulatory compliance. And that includes catch basin cleaning. We did quite a bit of catch basin cleaning. The mapping that was done, the permit requires you to have mapping done, and then outfall inspections. So we did some outfall inspections that were required as part of this permit.
We just go a little further, a lot of times we talk about unfunded mandates, and under the MS4 permit that EGLE administers, there are a lot of unfunded mandates. The good news about the SAW grant is that we were able to fund some of these activities that are a condition of our permit. So that was a huge advantage in being in a latter round and being able to take advantage of helping to bring us into compliance with MS4 requirements.
So as part of this program, in order to help with your MS4 compliance, we mapped approximately 135 miles of storm sewer, 193 outfalls, of which 113 are your MS4 outfalls. Not every single outfall is considered an MS4 outfall. We cleaned and inspected almost 2,400 catch basins. This is a photo of them vectoring out a catch basin to get all the debris out of it. And then another almost 1,200 manholes were cleaned and inspected. So this is just a map showing some potential MS4 locations. These red triangles that you see are locations of MS4 outfalls. So what were our findings of this grant? So below is a summary of how this funding was used. The asset inventory, as was discussed, there was also already quite a bit of background in the asset inventory in the GIS mapping that Alan and other staff members had started. The funding was used to really help update that for these urbanized areas. Quite a bit of additional structures and pipes were added into the GIS database. About 8,000 pipes and structures that were not already in there. That was done using record drawings and Google Earth images and finding these different structures and adding them in. And then we had field crews go out and GPS the structures so we know the exact location of where they are. Almost 1,600 sets of plans were scanned and linked to the GIS for easier reference. So now if someone needs to look at a set of as-built plans or a set of plans for a project, if a staff member needs to access that, they don't need to go into your vault. They can go into the GIS database, click on a hyperlink, and open that set of plans right at their desktop computer. It saves a lot of time. We have it at HRC and it's excellent. We located almost 3,200 structures and almost 100 outfalls. And then almost 2,500 culverts were located and rated using RoadSoft. And again, that asset inventory for the enclosed storm sewer system was primarily in the urbanized areas. However, that's generally where enclosed storm sewers are located anyway. Once you get into the more rural areas, we looked at a lot of the culverts, and those are generally more open ditch, open channel type drainage systems.
Karen, what is the GPS unit that was purchased?
Let me look that up. I have that.
I'm just
it was a Trimble R2 GPS device.
Oh yes, I'm well familiar. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Barb, there's a picture of it later in the presentation.
Thank you. We have that covered.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
So these are just examples of the maps that you can see in GIS. The images of the maps aren't really what we want to show you. And in a few minutes, I'm going to turn this over to Jim Miller, who's our GIS specialist, and he is going to actually go through share his screen showing a GIS desktop and an ArcGIS online where you can interact more with the data. But if you do need maps printed or shown, you can turn on and turn off layers to show whatever you need. So next we did the condition assessment and the preventative maintenance. And for this, we cleaned and inspected about 93% of the structures in the primary roads in those 5 townships in urbanized area. Inspection data was collected on almost 3,500 points and almost 4,000 pipes. And over 1,000 tons of debris were removed from the structures as part of the cleaning that was done. So got a lot of debris out of the system that's now not going to make it into the waterways.
So where does the debris go?
It goes to a landfill. It gets landfilled. And we worked with a contractor to take care of that. They had a Vector truck, sucked everything out and disposed of it. So there was condition data for 328 culverts, 4 of your storm scepters, and then We also inspected all of the stormwater assets at your 5 service centers, including any of the structures and any basins at any of those facilities. And so now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Jim Miller, and he's going to go through a brief description of both ArcGIS Online, AGO, and the desktop software. So I'll turn it over to you, Jim. Jim, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. So thanks, Karen. I'm going to show 2 softwares. If I can get this to work. There you go. Okay, so everybody see that? So there's 2 different software programs primarily that we use. This first one is what we used during the inspections out in the field. And so it was used on people's tablets, iPads primarily, and then also it could even run on your phone. And so these are all the structures, again, on the primary roads, as we mentioned, in those 5 more urbanized townships. So this area, we're showing I-94, US 23 intersection there in the southwest corner. And then these are all the points. You know, you've seen lots of numbers here so far. And these are just some of the points that we inspected. If we zoom in on an intersection, so this is Carpenter Road, north and south, and then Ellsworth. There's a large Myers store nearby there. And you can zoom in on these. And so this is the interactive portion of the map. And you can click on any point here. And so this is a particular manhole that we have. And this was the inspection information that we collected. I'll just expand this so you can see it a little bit better. So this is, it gives you things like the depth and the size of the manhole, the different types of material and conditions and so on. So, and then we would take photos, and I don't know if these photos are going to show up in this screen share. I don't know if you're able to see those or not, but so we would take a series of photos just showing kind of generally where the structure was located, and then we'd take photos down into the actual structure to see the condition. And so we'd look down these structures and you'd never know what you might see. So, so there are thousands of structures that we inspected and tens of thousands of photos. So there's the database that stores all these has gotten to be pretty significant. But it's the living document now. So as you continue doing maintenance, you can take more photos and link them into the GIS. And you know, just use this as a general maintenance tool. Are there any questions on this? Okay, if not, I'm going to share.
I'll just share, Jim. This is a tremendous benefit, especially as we're planning particular resurfacing projects. We may not be reconstructing, but we'll be resurfacing. We can go and see each of the structures to see if we can, if we need to reconstruct a portion or adjust or do any rehabilitation on these structures. We've already used it on several projects while they were collecting the data over the last couple of years and seen great benefit. So it's a tremendous resource for our staff, both in the engineering and operations departments.
Yes, thank you. And so as was mentioned earlier, one of the advantages of being in one of the later rounds of the SAW program, this technology wasn't even available at the beginning of the SAW program. So this is new mobile technology, mobile mapping technology that was just being developed in that 2013 timeframe. So when you submitted your grant, this was kind of an unknown option that we had. So it's been a huge time saver and really let us expand the amount of work that we did. So what the next thing I'm going to show is more the desktop version of this. So this is what you would have in the office now, basically. This is a older, more mature piece of software. It's more powerful and so forth. And so here we're over on the Jackson Road and Wagner Road interchange area in Scioto Township. And so these represent all the structures that we've added to the system. So over in the table of contents, we have Road Commission manholes and the Water Resource Commission structures. One of the big things that we tried to do as part of this project was to distinguish who owned what with the storm structures. So the Water Resource Commissioner and the Road Commission sort of collaborated on sharing their databases. And so what we've ended up with is a joint database between the two agencies and shows, for the most part, who owns what now. So when we first started the program, the Road Commission had about 2,000 pipes and structures in their entire database. And now you have over 30,000 structures and pipes based on merging them in with the Water Resource Commission, and then the 8,000 or so new features that we were able to map. So it's been a tremendous amount of information now that we've added in. So again, with this, you can click on a structure, a window will pop open. So we're on a particular catch basin here. We can go to the inspection information, click on that, and you can see who collected it, the data, things about the depth of the structure, what condition it's in. You get the scores down here that we will mention about in terms of how critical the structure was. We also have these photos located in here, so you can click on a particular photo and look down the pipe basically to see what kind of condition these structures are in. So again, there's something on the order of about 15,000 different photos that are linked to this. So there's just a tremendous amount of information within the database.
I just have to say, this is amazing. This is almost magic, right? I mean, it's just incredible, the amount of data that's been collected, cataloged, and is now searchable. It's breathtaking. It's amazing.
And that's a really good point, because it is all in a database and it is all searchable. You can do analysis with it. So, part of the report is we provided maps showing, here's where the worst 10 structures are in the county, or here's where you should spend your money. You've got a limited resources available. So here's your problem areas, so to speak, where to focus on in terms of a capital improvement planning, that kind of thing.
I'm also really impressed with the interagency cooperation that you have been able to merge other data rather than saying, no, that's ours. We don't want your stuff in with our stuff. I mean, it's a real tribute to the folks that collected this data and maintain it, and the cooperation between the leaders of these various agencies to actually link arms and put this together collaboratively. It feels like that's kind of rare these days, and I think it needs to be emphasized somewhere in that report.
Yeah, Barb, that was one of the, when we finally received notice that we would receive for the funding, the Water Resources Office had gone ahead of us. They were in, I'm not sure which round, but they were ahead of us on this. And so sharing the data has been something that Evan has talked about for a long time. So we were pleased to be able to actually contribute to that, as opposed to being on the receiving end and asking for their data all the time. So I agree, this has been a very nice relationship, because our systems are intertwined. And so there are definitely times, even our field staff, they go out there and they don't necessarily know whose structure is what. So it's a nice way to be able to utilize that information. And to, again, we serve the same people. So it's really nice to be able to do that collaboratively.
This is amazing technology. I'm just kind of curious, how often is it updated?
Well, the grant runs through the end of this year. And so we've been actively updating it through the course of these past 3 years. We were last out in the field doing inspection work probably in September, probably late September. We were still out doing some checking into some areas that to get everything finalized and trying to utilize all the resources we had available with the financing. So right now it's very much up to date as of this fall. Again, as Matt mentioned, we're working on the county primary roads in those 5 townships. And so there's a lot out there yet that we don't have, but you're leaps and bounds ahead of where you were 3 years ago. So
as part of
it is a living document that we have to keep working on.
Yeah, as part of the process of this grant, we've identified processes by which, all right, here's what we've done. We've been able to purchase some equipment, collectors, and Alan and other staff are able to go out and actually collect new things that we build. For instance, the Miller and Wagner roundabout that was constructed. We need to go out there and pick up all that data and put those structures and pipes into the system. And we're developing that process by which when we complete our construction projects, whether it's a contract we're managing or it's infrastructure we actually constructed with our own crews, we're going to be picking up that data. And what's wonderful is to have Alan Squire kind of leading that as a resource, and also as for training, he can help staff learn how to do it themselves. So we're developing those processes, and we anticipate, again, making this a living database whereby we're updating it as we're building things or rehabilitating or reconstructing.
And are there future grants like this one on the horizon?
Not at the moment.
At this point, we're not aware of any, but we continue to keep our eye out for grants that are coming up.
Okay.
So I'll turn it back over unless there's any other questions. I was just here over at Skyline High, and so you can see here where we have sort of a blend of the Road Commission data and water resource data. We also have the City of Ann Arbor's database. So it really is a great technology for integrating all different kinds of agencies who are really dealing with the same sort of problems.
Yeah, and we just received in the last month the entirety of the database. So Alan is going to be working with our staff to make it available. So it's not yet been dispersed. Parts of it have, certainly, but the idea is that, as Jim showed, you can have a desktop version and you can have a web-based version. The web-based version is what we anticipate being available for our field staff, so they can open up their laptop and be giving access to the web-based version to be able to basically on the fly, when they're out in the field, be able to open up that web application and zoom into where their location is and be able to see right for themselves all the information at their fingertips.
I have a question. I know in a lot of grants they ask, how are you able to sustain what it is that you have accomplished? Is there sustainability in this? It seems like it would be.
There was actually not a lot of sustainability, especially on the stormwater side. For the sanitary sewer side, anyone that got a sanitary asset management grant was asked to look at their rates for sanitary sewer and talk about how they're going to continue this. But this, because most places do not have a dedicated stormwater funding structure, Eagle does not require that. That being said, I think staff at the county and we recommend that this continue to be updated and continue to be used, but Eagle is not going to come back in 5 years and say, well, how come you haven't made any changes? How come you haven't updated it? So it's not a requirement of the grant. It's just best practices.
Is this something that the Water Resources Commissioner is leading the charge on, perhaps with the Board of County Commissioners, in terms of dedicating some existing funding for the maintenance of this data?
I'm not sure that Water Resources Commissioner is doing that. Matt, I don't know if you have any input or insight.
No, the bulk of what will fund this effort and continue to fund this effort is our MTF. There is no funding that I'm aware for stormwater in maintaining our stormwater assets. It's just part of our overall road infrastructure. It's just a piece of the puzzle.
So I have a question, like it's excellent data. And Jim, I immediately thought of an alarm system, or I saw that you had part of the purpose too was to get a description of how each system that you looked at, its condition. So I heard you say there was going to be a report, kind of prioritized report. So that was my question. How do we know that where to go look, you know, or where the staff knows to, and maybe Matt, you can answer that, you know, you prioritize what's going to need maintenance based on the data that's provided now, or like I need to go, we're going to need to go look at this system again in 5 years or 2 years because this has a hairline crack here. So I was wondering how that data is going to help us and how we can continue to do that, or so that's what I was wondering, an alarm system or some kind of system, how that's going to work.
And I can take that. That's actually our next slide, so I can.
Very good. Nice job, Gloria. You're dovetailing right into the presentation.
So the next thing that we did do was look at the future planning piece of this. And in order to do that, we look at several different things, including the criticality of each pipe and the level of service that the township or the county is looking to get to. So criticality, what we did was we took, criticality is basically looking at the probability of failure. So how likely is this asset to fail at any given time, and the consequence of failure. So what happens if this asset does fail? The probability of failure is generally more based on condition. So that's why we did the condition assessment and came up with that probability of failure score. For any assets that we didn't specifically have our eyes on and do a condition assessment of, we took probability of failure based on the Payzer ratings of the road, because we understand that if you have a high or a low Payzer rating for the road, that's likely going to be one you're going to be looking at next. So you should be, or in the nearer future, so you should be looking at the storm sewer associated with that road when you're looking at doing repairs on the road. But for ones that we did actually physically inspect, we came up with a list of ones that need to be addressed based on their current condition. So we took, like I said, that probability of failure, and then we also took the consequence of failure. Consequence of failure is a number that's not really going to change over time. If it's a high consequence utility, it doesn't matter if it's brand new or 100 years old. If that asset fails, it could potentially be an issue. So those are, your major road crossings. If you have any railroad crossings, things like that, where if that asset fails, it's a lot more expensive to fix and probably more impact to fix that. So we looked at those different items. We ran a model of the system to say, what is the consequence of failure? What's the probability of failure? Those are both numbers between 1 and 5, with 1 being low and 5 being high. So it's opposite the Payzer scale, of course, where 10 is in excellent shape and 1 is in terrible shape on the Payzer scale. And then we take those two numbers, 1 to 5, multiply them together and get a scale of 1 to 25. And that's called the business risk evaluation. And then we use that to identify the most highly critical areas where you should be looking at more often. And then there's recommendations in the report for areas that should be inspected more frequently because of their high criticality, or because of the condition that we have found them to be in. They're maybe not quite ready to be fixed immediately, but you should keep an eye on them. So those recommendations are all in the report looking at that. And then we use that to develop a CIP, a capital improvement plan. And the capital improvement plan, because most of your funding comes from the TIP, the local road millage, your long range plan, things like that, we looked at those items and we developed capital improvements necessary on the storm system in the roads that are in those longer range plans for the next 0 to 20 years or as available. But then we also identified if there were structures that we inspected that are in terrible condition and need to be addressed more immediately, and the road's not anywhere in any planning document, then we had a list of those too that went into that capital improvement plan for improvement. So that is the criticality and the operation and maintenance and capital improvement plan. On the operation and maintenance side, we also provided recommendations for how often, one, structures should be inspected, which I already kind of discussed. The more highly critical ones need to be inspected more often. And two, areas where we found that there was a lot of sediment in the sumps for the catch basins, so they should potentially be cleaned a little bit more often than others. So this is the business risk evaluation that I talked about. You can kind of see on this map the dots are the different structures and what business risk we gave them. The blue is 1 to 5. The green is 5 to 10. There's a couple yellows in there that are a little bit more critical. We don't have any oranges or reds on this plan. Generally, we're finding that most things that drive your criticality are the consequence of failure, the location, not as much the condition, although there were some poor condition features that we did find. And then finally, the final thing we did was purchase hardware and software. So we were able to purchase 26 laptops for field and office staff in order to continue to maintain this program. The Trimble R2 GPS device, an iPad controller, a GoPro camera, so that can be used to put down into a structure and take video if something's harder to see from the surface. And then a Leica imaging scanner and iPad controller. So a scanner as well, so you can continue to scan plans and link them into the system. So
yeah, and of those 26 laptops, it had definitely included all of our foremen, superintendents of maintenance, and anyone that is managing projects that would have a need to access this data for the stormwater information. So it was a tremendous benefit for our IT as well, because certainly it supplemented replacement schedules for our current laptops. So it was a great purchase, and we were able to purchase rugged laptops for our foremen who are exposed to all kinds of temperatures as well. So just a tremendous benefit.
What type of things, Matt, does that GoPro camera allow you to do?
Basically, we can certainly video and take pictures, and the GoPro is a little more rugged, so we can put it on one of the what's it, a fancy selfie stick, and be able to stick it down where we don't necessarily want staff going, or if it's in a stream, you can be above the culvert and go lower. So the GoPro camera has a lot of different uses, and certainly it applies not only to stormwater, but we can use the GoPro camera for videoing sites prior to construction, pre and post construction. So a lot of different uses. Also the scanner as well. The scanner can basically scan the inside of a manhole and alleviate the need to go down in the manhole. but the scanner can also be used for other purposes, such as scanning and as-builting ADA sidewalk ramps. So definitely trying to utilize all the technology in not only just the stormwater assets in managing our stormwater assets, but also all the other work we do.
Yeah, and just to emphasize, Matt, how important it is, if we can avoid actually having to put someone into a manhole or structure, that is a good thing, because that does start to raise issues with respect to confined space, and we want to make sure that our staff stays as safe as possible.
So the next steps, the county is going to continue to maintain and add to the GIS database, and future efforts may expand to include local roads as well as roads outside of that urbanized areas. And then the plan should be used as a guideline for asset management on the storm system as it relates to other assets. So you have a road asset management plan. That's all the PASER ratings and everything that you do. In the fall of 2021, there's going to be a bridge and a bridge and an update to that pavement AMP. So really this is just one piece of the puzzle and connecting all of your assets together so you can determine the best way to use your limited resources. And I can turn it over to Matt and he can talk about any other future steps that the county wants to take on.
Yeah, so as part of a law that was adopted a couple of years ago now, the state requires all road commissions to have both bridge and pavement asset management plans. They required within a 3-year period for all the road commissions to submit those plans to the state. We were in the second round, so our asset management plan for both the bridge and pavements is due this coming fall. So we'll be discussing that further. More asset management planning to come, including setting goals for both plans. So we'll be discussing that in future working sessions this year, with ultimately culminating into the adoption of both the bridge and pavement asset management plans in the fall, so that we can be in compliance with the law. And this stormwater asset management plan will certainly fit into that nicely for both plans.
So is this another unfunded mandate?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that's all I had today, unless there's questions or any other discussion.
Well, thank you, Karen and Jim, for sharing this information today. This was, again, it's a huge effort that's been in the making for the last 3 years. And I'd really like to recognize Alan Squire and Matt McDonnell. They've been working right alongside HRC throughout all of this. And it's fun to see. You can already see how important this information is and the different types of uses that are out there. And that's just the beginning. This is something that we will continue to discuss. And it's nice to see that the board understands already how important the information is, because we do need to continue to, at a minimum, maintain the database that we have so that it remains current, and then certainly talk about future expansion as well.
And again, we're very fortunate to have Alan Squire, who managed the bulk of this project with HRC, and he will continue to help us keep it a living document. He does a great job and did a great job throughout the grant, and he's just a tremendous resource, and I appreciate all the work he put into this, along with HRC. Great job.
Nice presentation.
Thank you very much, and thank you guys for having us, and thanks for the opportunity. And it's been a great project, I think, and as Matt and Cheryl both said, it's definitely a collaborative effort. We couldn't have done it without county staff, who have been very involved in every single aspect of this, and excited about the final of this product and seeing it move forward.
All right. Well, thank you for coming today. Have a happy holiday if we don't have an opportunity to see you before then. So thank you.
You as well. And thanks everyone for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you.
So Mr. Chair, are we next up on our agenda, or is everybody ready for just a very quick break before we move into our next topic? We've been sitting for a while.
I am.
All right, it looks like it is almost 20 after.
How about we reconvene at 10:30?
Perfect.
Want to lead us into this conversation here?
Sure, I'd be happy to do so. So next up on the agenda is the responsible contractor policy. This topic was brought to us by Commissioner Yamas, who asked that we consider the county's responsible contractor policy. And as part of that conversation, I thought it would be helpful to share some information about procurement, specifically as it relates to building and facilities with respect to the Road Commission. I also sent out last week both the county's responsible contractor policy and our own procurement policy, as well as some bid documents from a project that we completed recently. So everyone at least has a little bit of general information to get started. So Emily, if we could go to the next slide. Just briefly, as far as the county's responsible contractor policy, that was recently approved by the county. I believe that was in July that they adopted that. And essentially it seeks the lowest and most responsible bid instead of always going with just low bid. It's a very detailed policy that utilizes 30 detailed criteria to evaluate the bids. And in the resolution adopting the policy, the county specifically states that it applies to building construction projects and to contracts that are $50,000 or greater in value. Next slide, please. It also supplements the existing procurement policies and procedures at the county, and it is administered by the county finance director. Next slide, please. So in contrast, we have the Road Commission's current procurement policy, which is, frankly, it's quite broad, but essentially it ensures that the Road Commission purchases quality goods and services at competitive prices while providing fair opportunity for all contractors. Next slide, please. The policy does follow the Uniform Accounting Procedures Manual for road commissions. Again, it's a broad policy which applies to materials, equipment, supplies, and contractual services. And that certainly applies to any of our building contracts. It does list the specific purchasing authorities by position within that policy, and it was most recently updated in June of 2018. Overall, the intent of that policy is to result in responsible contracts and contractors in how we do conduct any of our business. Next slide, please. So with that as just a little bit of background information, I thought it would be useful to talk about sort of the practical applications of that policy. Most facility projects that we have are actually handled in-house by our facility staff. We have 3 full-time staff and 1 supervisor that are in our facilities, or sometimes what we refer to as our buildings and grounds department. And we've got several projects that we'd like to share that are sort of typical of the type of work that we would be doing on the buildings that we have throughout the county. So Jim's been very helpful in putting this together, since much of this responsibility falls within his area. So I would like to turn it over to Jim to just give you a brief explanation of several sort of typical projects that we would be doing on our facilities. So Jim, if I could hand it over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. The work that I'm going to describe is initially it's performed in-house. It's performed by our buildings and grounds staff. They're very skilled employees that are highly capable. Where we run into work that is beyond their capabilities or beyond the amount of time that they have available in the midst of everything else that they're doing, we will outsource work. We will engage others subject to our procurement policy. The examples that are on this slide are relatively small in nature. And the first one listed as an example in-house is at our Manchester yard. Staff at that location, very much, we've been talking over several years of altering the office area, which is largely open to the parking garage. That's a small, older facility. So the noise, the dust, any washing of vehicles that's required to occur in there, there could be impact in the area where the employees meet, have their breaks, and certainly impactful on the office area itself and the computers and whatnot. So we've been contemplating for some time building a partition wall and further enclosing that. That work is actually underway right now. The rough carpentry was performed by our buildings and grounds personnel, and they're working to put up the sheeting and insulation. You can see in the left-hand picture, the beginning of the plywood being placed on the exterior or the parking garage side of the new partition wall. You see the mezzanine and the ladders to the right of the leftmost picture. That's the existing break room and office area. So we're extending a partition wall and further enclosing that to separate that break and office area from the parking garage. Our buildings and ground staff are certainly competent, capable, trained, experienced to perform that work. So we're hoping to have that completed here in the next several days. Great benefit to the group at our Manchester satellite yard. Next slide, please. Another example would be just a couple of years ago, performed a renovation and update of our main yard foreman office, which is located behind our administration building on the east end of our parking garage. Also, we have a driver's break room that's co-located with our kiosks for timekeeping and inventory. There's also a men's and women's locker room bathroom. So we undertook a remodeling of that and did a number of updates, certainly a deep cleaning, new partition walls, doors, and appliances in the bathroom facilities, updated, put in drop ceiling, repainting, and we did outsource the epoxy floor for those areas, found that to be more cost effective and engaging a contractor that specializes in that. So we secured quotes and actually outsourced the epoxy floor treatment. But for the most part, the work was performed by buildings and ground staff and completed on time, on budget, and really updated and improved those older facilities. The final one is a very minor but an important activity that the group performed at our Kaiser Well in Linden Township. As the board knows, we own and operate, we have for decades, a mineral brine well facility. And where the actual pump jack is located, that is enclosed in a fence area. And the gate to have access to that pump jack had gotten into disrepair, and the crew went in and excavated and cast a concrete sill and adjusted the gate so it was more secure, plumb, square, and really improved the security of that particular facility. A minor improvement, but an important one. And I might add, the group does a variety of tasks countywide in support of all of our operations on our properties and facilities. Next slide, please. So Cheryl, I'll refer it back to you and then follow your lead in the further presentation.
Sure, thanks, Jim. So I think that was a good sampling of projects. It's pretty typical of the type of work that's performed by our staff. But we do get into projects that are, for the most part, what we would call capital repair or rehabilitation type projects that are a little bit more extensive. And like Jim said, whether it's that it requires a skill set that's beyond that our staff may have, or whether it's just time-wise more than what they can already currently schedule, we do go out for bid. We typically have somewhere between 3 and 5 building projects that we bid each year. We do bid that through BidNet. And typically the bid documents are outlining the specific requirements, not only of the contracting process for us, but also then the specific requirements of the projects themselves. So I'll hand it back to Jim to give a little bit more detail with respect to how we actually go through the mechanics of bidding that.
Thank you, Cheryl. The bid specifications and all the qualifications that we require are outlined in the bid documents and available now on BidNet. We've been doing that for just a couple of years. Prior to that, it was more old school. We would publish advertisement, solicitation in our newspapers. That became more troublesome because we had less and less of those. Posted it on the County Road Association website. Many of the folks that we do business with monitor the bid page at County Road Association on a statewide basis, a regional basis. We also post on our website, and many of the contractors and vendors that we work with monitor our website for any postings. And then, of course, we push out those solicitations to any and all qualified contractors that have done business with us in the past or been brought to our attention. We certainly are looking to engage the best value for the road commission, least cost, and most qualified. And there is several criteria that we use to assess the bidders in preparing our recommendation for board consideration. The procurement policy sets financial thresholds where Cheryl or even a department head has financial authority to enter into contracts. Basically anything over $50,000 must come to the board, and at that threshold it would require sealed bids. So again, using BidNet as the more modern means of engaging the contracting and vendor community for responses. Next slide. Wanted to provide a couple of examples of these capital investments that we've performed. A few years ago, we solicited sealed bids to resurface, re-roof our stockroom here at the main yard. That's the area Jeff Mann and Warren Koppel work out of, our secure storage, stockroom in Jeff's office. And that roof had reached the end of its service life and required re-roofing. We solicited sealed bids. We received 2 bidders, Quality Roofing and Bloom Roofing. They may be familiar with you, certainly competent, highly qualified roofing contractors here locally. Bloom Roofing happened to be the qualified low bidder, and that's who we recommended to the Board of Road Commissioners. That was back in 2014. The board accepted that recommendation and awarded that contract, and Bloom successfully completed the work on time and in accordance with budget and the specifications for the job. That was slightly less than $50,000, a little over $40,000 as noted. The next project was the insulation and installation of furnaces and also water lines to our what were cold storage barns located at our Chelsea and Manchester satellite yards. We solicited sealed bids for both of those projects combined, and the bids, we received 1 bidder. And as part of that bid solicitation, we did require a mandatory pre-bid walkthrough. There was only 1 prospective bidder. That happened to be Lion Mechanical, local contractor, highly capable. They did submit the bid on BidNet, and we got a single bid. It was within our estimate, and we recommended that bid to the board. The board did approve it. They met all specifications and criteria and did successfully complete the project on time and as on budget as awarded by the board. And we're benefiting from those improvements at this time, certainly. it's greatly expanded our capabilities at those two facilities, having the additional heated storage buildings. The next one, main yard generator. This was a result of, first of all, a generator absolutely essential to the continuity of operations for all of our locations, all of our facilities. In the event we have a power disruption or a grid down like we had back in '04, our generators ensure that we can maintain service delivery for our communities and remain operational. I had, on behalf of the Road Commission, applied for a Homeland Security grant for financing the generator. We are a member of the Washtenaw County Homeland Security Task Force, and so we were successful in securing funding. We went out for sealed bids in 2013 for a 400 kilowatt standalone diesel generator, which presently exists. It replaced an undersized 100 kilowatt natural gas generator here at our main yard, which only powered a portion of our circuitry. The 400 kilowatt generator powers everything plus reserve capacity for the main yard. We received 8 bids from local contractors. The low qualified bid was actually Harper Electric, and we recommended, after vetting all the bidders and examining the bids, we recommended Harper Electric to the board. Harper, of course, is a member of local IPW, local trades council, highly competent. We've used Harper many times successfully in the past. That was just under $200,000, and Harper completed the installation of our new generator and all the switch gear. Emily, we may have some photographs. I'm not certain of these things in some slides. This, I'll go through this. Those are some pictures of the sheeting internal to our cold storage barns and one of the furnaces that was installed. Insulation, of course, behind that sheeting and in the ceiling for those heated spaces. Next slide. That's a picture of our existing generator here at the main yard. On the left is the generator. The black base is the diesel fuel tank that the generator cabinetry and generator sits on, located adjacent to our parking garage, the south side of our parking garage. And on the right side is the actual electric switch gear. It's located inside, behind the external generator, and it's inside the parking garage under shelter. That senses if the DT power is disrupted in whole or in part, and then switches over to the generator, fires up the generator, and we're powered on a standalone system, independent of Detroit Edison. When the Detroit Edison power is restored, that switchgear senses that and then turns off the generator and switches us back over to external power. Again, we had 8 bidders. Harper Electric was awarded the contract and successfully completed that in 2013, and we continue to benefit from that infrastructure. Next slide. Then we can get into very large projects. This is typically a capital outlay that's on a 10 to 15 year frequency. Not very often. Usually the board has to save for these types of initiatives. Usually uses either municipal bond sale or installment purchasing to finance a significant part of this. This example is fairly recent. It's our Northeast Service Center. It was the purchase of property and the development of a new modern satellite maintenance yard in the northeast part of the county. The procurement on something like this is much more elaborate, much more involved. We went through an extensive examination of the property before recommending purchase to the board. The property became available really coming out of the Great Recession, and property values for this type of property plummeted in the county. We found this, it was originally listed before the recession about $1 million. We got this at about $345,000, located on North Territorial east of US 23. It was the former Moore's RV site. Acquired the property only closed on that purchase after we completed environmental assessment to make sure that we had a clean property. We did. A few years later, after further savings and planning with the board, we solicited through quality-based selection process an architect. We had received 4 responses to our QBS solicitation. Hobbs & Black was the most qualified architect. And we recommended a contract for planning and engineering to the board, which the board did accept, awarded that contract to Hobbs & Black. Took about a year to go through the planning and design process, which also included pretty extensive review and approval with Northfield Township Planning Commission, required applications to be submitted and permits to be secured from the state of Michigan for our water well, for our fuel depot. So a much more complex and involved procurement process. The design was successfully completed on time and on budget. We ultimately recommended the board they extend contract to Hobbs & Black for the construction and contract management component. We went out for sealed bids, a public bid solicitation in I believe it was 2017, and received 9 bids from qualified contractors to develop the property. We ultimately selected the low 4 for post-bid interviews and value analysis. The Board of Road Commissioners participated in those meetings, which was really important to be fully informed and comfortable with the ultimate recommendation. Hobbs & Black, we hosted that in our assembly room downstairs, and Hobbs & Black administered those post-bid interviews for us. We ultimately concluded that Phoenix Contractors, a local professional contractor here out of Ypsilanti, was the qualified low bidder. The board accepted that recommendation and awarded contract to Phoenix. And coming out of that, of course, going through our pre-construction process and ultimately issuing notice to proceed, the work got underway and was completed through 2017, allowing us to take occupancy and have a final certificate of occupancy from Northfield Township and the state in January of 2018. And the Road Commission continues to benefit from that investment, which was in total probably close to $9 million, including the property acquisition and all of the professional services. It's about $8 million for the construction. So a range of procurement with regard to buildings, facilities, Northeast Service Center being a recent example, probably the most complex, the most involved, tremendous amount of vetting to reach a point where a recommendation can confidently be made to the Board of Road Commissioners for contract award. Cheryl, was there anything else that comes to mind that you'd like me to speak to with regard to the presentation at this point?
No, I thank you very much for presenting all of that. Unless the commissioners had questions, we could go to the next slide, Emily. So before we open it up for questions or for comments, I think that I'd just like to state that this was actually a very useful exercise as we were having this discussion amongst staff. We were looking at our own procurement. We do have a lot of information on our website, like Jim indicated. We have a variety of projects that we do work on where we are bidding documents. So I think it's always a good undertaking to look at the information that we have, not only the content of the information, whether it be our bid documents themselves or the contracts that we utilize, as well as the manner in which we present that information or perhaps don't have the information available. So that certainly has been a good undertaking, and I think that staff's got some ideas already about some improvements that may be beneficial on that side of things. And then we also are interested in comments that the board may have with respect to our existing procurement policy, and certainly relevant to the types of projects that Jim just described. So with that, Mr. Chair, if I may hand it back over to you.
Thank you. Jim, thank you for that presentation. It is as Cheryl just said, it's a useful exercise to review what we're doing. With all that having been said, what I'd like to do to move this conversation forward is inquire from my fellow commissioners if they have specific questions or concerns about our current policy or how we convey what that policy is to the public, i.e., and I know staff has been looking at what things we could add to our website that would facilitate people doing business with us. Certainly, the easier it is for people to do business with us, the more apt we are to receive valuable input, both in what measures can be done as well as how much money they should cost. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my fellow commissioners.
Chair, excuse me. I'm looking at the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners resolution, and they have in the second paragraph, they say why there are the intent or whatever of the resolution, which says effective internal controls safeguard against impropriety, favoritism, or conflict of interest on part of any county official or employee. Does our policy have anything like that stating that in our policy?
Boy, Joanne, that's an excellent question. Cheryl, what do you think?
Well, I guess there's a couple of different subjects or I think components to that statement. Our policy reads specifically that it is the intent of the Washtenaw County Board of Road Commissioners to ensure that the Road Commission purchases quality goods and services at competitive prices in a cost-effective manner while still providing fair opportunity to all vendors, including disadvantaged business enterprises. So I think that as far as you know, the general goal, I think that personally I like our statement. I think that that is an important statement. With respect to the internal controls and safeguards, we do follow the accounting procedures manual for road commissions. And actually that's in the process of being updated right now as well. So again, another important piece of information that we can not only continue to reference, but if there's things that we should be pulling out of that manual and specifically make sense policy-wise to include within the policy, we can take a look at that as well. But a lot of those controls that are referenced are within the manual itself.
But it doesn't state that. What she speaks about is not stated in our policy. I do like our policy, you know, but as I had spoke before, maybe they can be integrated together. It doesn't have to look like this exactly. It offers extra protection for the road commission, but it's not stated anywhere. I couldn't find it in any of our policies. And the accounting procedures, which I'm familiar with, and I'm sure Dan is a lot more familiar with, have to do with obtaining 3 bids. And maybe Dan can go into that more specifically.
And I'm thinking too, Cheryl and Gloria, with that, what I just read from the other policy, the counties, I know how I feel about the road commission just from May and getting involved. My feeling of trust will be different from someone else on the outside reading the policy. And with that so well stated in the county, they're making a statement, it's more clear about the trust. Whereas I don't need to have that for me. I trust, what's going on here, but it's just people on the outside would probably understand that or have that connection quicker by seeing that statement.
Maybe some of the challenges too is it refers quite often to the Uniform Accounting Manual, which, by the way, is 344 pages. So light reading or heavy reading, whatever you would refer to it. But there is a section on ethical standards. It's actually on page 257 that refers to some of the issues were brought up that, and I'm just reading from it. A purchaser for a county road commission shall not be financially interested or have any personal beneficial interest, directly or indirectly, in any contract or purchase order for supplies, materials, equipment used, or and so on and so forth. So, maybe part of the issue is, our procurement policy is pretty broad, but it is also references several times to this massive document. So, what I just read is kind of what was brought up in the county's policy, but maybe it isn't inherent by reading our procurement policy, if that makes sense.
It indeed does make sense. And I believe that was some of why this came into being, because as we've talked about this, and as I've talked about it with Cheryl and with the attorney and other people, as I understand, we may indeed have this, but they're all over the place. Mm-hmm. They're not pulled together in one spot to be easily read by the public and or to be understood, the intricacies. And so that's part of the issue, where things are buried, not intentionally buried, but they are buried. And that's not to assume that people are trying to hide something, but it's not easily accessible. And absolutely, the policy, it does not intend to take work away from in-house, because we should do that in-house, right? Because we do it successfully. And because of the level of expertise that you have. I mean, anybody's going to do that. So kind of, as Jim was talking, a couple of questions came up to mind for me when, let's see if I can write it down. I wrote it down here someplace. Quality-based process for choosing the engineering company. Where is the quality-based process that you're talking about? And what is that process?
That's actually policy. And a few years ago, the board initiated process toward ISO 9001 certification. We actually speak to this in board policy in great detail. And I think, again, it'd be helpful to share that and bring that forward and make that more readily available and transparent to the public. But that is policy and something that Matt and his group apply routinely. In fact, HRC, who we just met with, may have been selected through that process. I see Matt's nodding. Hobbs and Black, our architect, certainly was selected using that process. And I really put a lot of trust, faith, and confidence in it. That was a good process to go through to identify the best professional services for us, for Northeast Service Center.
Right, and that in the policy, it does, that specifically is referenced with respect to professional services that we would be utilizing the qualifications-based selection process for specifically those types of services. But again, if there's a way, whether it is to further clarify within our policy some of the things we were just talking about, I think this is an opportunity to do that. Or if it's consistent with how this board has done policy in the past, if there needs to be a companion procedure that goes along with it, so that we've got sort of statements of principle within the policy itself, but then instead of making the broad statement that we'll follow the uniform manual of whatever, that, you know, maybe we're a little bit more refined within the procedure itself. So we're keeping, again, the policy broad, which, for example, our community engagement policy is very broad, but we have a companion document that now talks about tiers as far as the type of projects and when we would engage in certain type of community engagement and on that particular topic. So if we need to pull out specifically qualifications-based selection and then just give a brief outline of what that might be or how that would look or where that would point, I think that staff can come up with something, again, whether it's in the policy itself or whether then it becomes a companion document. But again, very much understanding the point that we need this to be open and transparent and readily available to the public so that they understand how we are doing business.
Exactly. The procurement policy from 2018 is amended, references the quality-based selection, which is based on the state of Michigan, Michigan Department of Transportation methodology, and our ISO 9001 procedure, purchasing procedure, elaborates on that even further. So I recognize this information, you know, we could probably do a better job of making it available as information.
Well, one of the things I would like to see come out of this certainly is the fact that it becomes easy, and I emphasize easy and straightforward for someone who wished to mow grass, just to use an example for the road commission, of finding out what the existing contract would look like and how it's administered and what would be the requirements for me to, in the fullness of time, whether the contract is up in 2 years, in 3 years, in 6 months, so that I would know how I could get my name in the queue to be at least considered. And I use that just as an example because mowing grass is something that pretty much nationwide, or actually, excuse me, worldwide, everybody that owns a road mows the grass alongside it for good and sufficient reasons. So, you know, if you live in Washtenaw County or in Keokuk, Iowa, somebody's going to mow the grass alongside the roads. And if you have some interest in doing that, then there should be a place for you to find out how you could be at least considered. Is this something that is beyond the ken? Is this something that I could aspire to? What do I have to do to get there? So that's what I would like to see come out of this, among other things, but that would be very high on my list. And whether that was mowing the grass, providing plumbing services, providing roofing services, the sorts of things that go on all day, every day, in every entity that owns facilities, somebody is maintaining them, whether it's in-house, and certainly our buildings and grounds guys are superb. There's absolutely no question. When they do something, it's well into the 99th degree. It's done right the first time. However, we're not always, for the reasons that were cited, we may not always choose to do it ourselves. So anyway, I want it to be as easy as is humanly possible for someone who aspires to do business with us to be able to figure out what it is that they have to do. You know, can I do this with one tractor and I bid on one township, or do I have to bid across the entire county and I'm going to need blank number of tractors? All of these things. And the accessibility of that information is the most important part. So that's what I would like us to achieve out of this review.
Just to piggyback, just to piggyback on what Doug has mentioned, and maybe this question is for sure, or anyone else who might have any information regarding it. is there anything in our policy or procedure that allows us or enables us to monitor and ensure that disadvantaged business enterprises, DBEs, are given the benefit of maximum consideration? Do we have anything in place that monitors that process to make sure that they're being considered, or make, or as Doug mentioned, even have the ability to access and know what they have to do to get into the queue?
Well, and I think that might be part of the process. I don't want to answer that question because I don't know. I think Cheryl can answer that question. But I know as far as, and I did speak to Cheryl about this, that the contracting portion to structures is going to be different than any contracting, because the roads are going to be done through the state, because that's funded through the state and they already have theirs. So that I know that this policy is going to, needs to be designed for the road commission, because a blanket policy cannot be, and maybe that's why the purchase policy is so broad, but to be specific to all the other things, it needs to be, because we couldn't write that into the roads because PA 105 would prohibit that, but it could be included in our structures and other contracting work that we would go beyond, that we're not held with in-house. So Cheryl, I guess I'll let you answer.
I'm sorry, Gloria, I have no idea what your question is.
I don't have a question. I was
okay.
I was just adding comment onto what Rod was saying.
Yeah. But I have a question, because I am specifically asking about DBEs. That was mentioned earlier, disadvantaged business enterprises. And I just want to make sure that they're being considered and allowed the access to, like as Doug said, they know how to get into the queue and be considered to the maximum extent. It's my feeling that a lot of times we draw these policies up and we use these phrases and they're given lip service, disadvantaged business enterprises. And that's fine, but what are we doing to make sure that happens? That's what I'm talking about. Are we doing anything?
Rod, is your question about outreach? Is your question about our scoring criteria? Again, I'm trying to understand what we need to do that we're not doing.
But I don't know. That's kind of what I'm asking,
because DBE is illegal.
Disadvantaged business enterprises. Okay.
Right.
They're given that they're going to be considered or utilized. And I'm wondering, do we have a process in place in policy or procedure that monitors how successful we're doing in terms of making sure that DBEs are being considered and used? Do we have a process in place, or is that something that we don't need to think about?
So is DBE a certification? I mean, is that something that it's acquired, you apply, you get a DBE designation?
I think so. Maybe Cheryl can help me with that.
Well, I'm familiar with DBEs on the road building side of things. So I guess I hesitate on the building side of things. I know on the road side of things, and when I say road and bridges, that is a specific designation that is determined through the Michigan Department of Transportation. So if there's something similar that exists within the building trades, that may be, I'm just not familiar with it. So unless Jim can say, and yes, he's raising his hand, so I'm going to allow him to handle that part of it. But before I do that, I think we're talking about two different things. And one of them is that I think, Rod, again, I'm open to amending our current policy, and we certainly can bring back language that hopefully will make it a stronger policy. So that is absolutely the case. But even right now, it does state that providing a fair opportunity to all vendors, including disadvantaged business enterprises. Now, that's a policy statement. And again, I think is important with respect to policy. If we're talking about process and monitoring and outreach or accessibility, those are very important things, but to me, those aren't like the policy things. So as we're putting and talking about potential language to policy or changes, we can certainly look at certain things, but I don't know if we need anything more than that in the policy. What we would be looking at as we're talking about is accessibility. Again, trying to see that through the eyes of someone trying to do business with us, as opposed to being inside the system, which often is how we are looking at it when we're setting things up. So Jim, I guess if you want to talk about any of the business that we have had with DBE, or if we're monitoring, or how we're doing that on the building side of things.
You basically said what I was intending to say. And our practice is to follow the board policy to have a public solicitation, an open solicitation to get as many qualified bidders as possible, including disadvantaged business enterprises. That's why we're using BidNet to cast a very broad net of solicitation. And we certainly recognize, subject to the board's policy, disadvantaged business enterprises. Are we monitoring that, reporting that out? No, we're not. But we absolutely include those DBEs should they bid, should they submit a bid for us. I can't think of anything, Cheryl, recently that comes to mind where I can say, oh yeah, during this procurement process, this solicitation, we had 2 DBEs. I can't, nothing jumps to mind. And I'm not ruling out that we haven't received them. I just can't recollect at this moment.
And I think that was, and Rod, please correct me if I'm wrong, that was specifically to Rod's, what I heard Rod say, are we monitoring internally when a DBE puts in a bid with us or a request to provide services? Are we following that up? Are we monitoring the results of that follow-up? That is always, it's exactly in my own mind the same thing as, are we getting enough women applying for positions in the operating department? No, we're not. That is an industry-wide problem. I don't know how to solve it. If I did, I wouldn't be at the Washtenaw County Road Commission. I'd be in Washington, D.C. making policy for the U.S. government. It's a very fair question. Part of the answer to that is, Jim, what you just said, is we're casting the net as wide as we can by use of things like BidNet, trying to make this process as available to people as reasonably possible. Now, Barb will very correctly point out that when we put things online, there's half of the people in Washtenaw County, for geographically, certainly not population-wise, but half of the people in Washtenaw County geographically have no idea what we put online because they don't have access to it. Now, that's not the population base. It's not distributed by population base. I mean, what do we have? 2/3 of the county lives east of Carpenter Road, or excuse me, east of Wagner Road, for some number like that. So the half of the county that does not have reliable internet is only 1/3 of the population. But it's to me, this entire, or most of this conversation is judged by accessibility of the information. You know, if I can't get disadvantaged business enterprises to apply to us, there's no need of having a monitoring system. First, I need to figure out how to get people to try and do business with us. One of the reasons, and I used the example of mowing a few minutes ago, when we first started contract mowing, we did it, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, we did it by one district, did we not? One of our own maintenance districts at a time.
I believe it was, yeah, we did a demonstration project for a district to prove to ourselves that we could make it work. Yes, sir.
That's exactly correct. Now, that, to me, is an example of a place where we might be able to say, okay, if what we're trying to do is get disadvantaged business enterprises, however that's defined, to Barb's point, is that by dollar amount? Is that by gender? Is it by race? Is it by whatever? But let's just say disadvantaged business. If we break the contract up into smaller pieces, we're apt to get more people. It is possible we would get more people to have interest because they may not be able to go out and buy 6 mowing tractors or 10 mowing tractors or whatever the number is to get countywide, if that's the way our contract reads. But if we broke it up into a maintenance district of 2 or 3 townships, or even 4 townships, you may well get other kinds of contractors or potential business partners involved. Something for the board to consider. And they would have to consider it by way of yourself and others bringing it forward to the board to consider. But I think Gloria is onto something here that's very valuable. If the information is in 5 different places on page 247 of the Manual of Accounting Practices, that's not accessible to people who are trying to do business with the county on a small scale. Probably available to a reasonable sized contractor in his legal department who make sure that every bid that they put in is likely to be considered. Rod, as I say, asked a good question. What measures have we got in place to monitor our own performance? That was the question, was it not, Rod?
That's exactly right. And your suggestion about breaking up contracts to make it more enticing to small businesses, I think is an excellent idea.
Well, it is an idea. And thank
you. It's an idea, one. But I like that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
The peril in doing that is losing an economy of scale. There is an economic reality. We fully understand the Road Commission is fiscally constrained. There's not enough money to do everything that we need to do. So when you break things up into smaller pieces, you may, and you may not, avail it to different audiences. I hope that wouldn't be the case. I would hope the broader solicitation would cast that broad net, but you may end up realizing greater costs because you've lost the economy of scale. To your point, Doug, mowing, in 2011, we outsourced that service and we focused on York and Saline and Augusta townships.
Right.
A small district to demonstrate to ourselves, to prove to the Road Commission, we can do this and we can do it effectively. And then at the conclusion of that, we solicited a bid for countywide and realized an economy of scale. It became worth the bidder's while, and the value of that contract was such it attracted folks that were truly qualified, outfitted, had the equipment and the capability and the experience to perform that job safely and efficiently. If you do it in small pieces, you might lose that. So we're it's a balance, and there may be instances where that makes complete sense. But again, all of this costs money, and the Road Commission has historically tried to get the most qualified contractor or vendor at the least cost, get the greatest value, the greatest bang for the buck. look forward to where this goes, where we can improve the process and the information exchange. I think there's area for improvement. I agree. I think Gloria has touched on something where we can get that information out better to the world.
Absolutely.
But we also, you know, we're creatures of the legislature and really a subdivision of the state of Michigan. We are subject to numerous state laws. We are subject to the Uniform Accounting Manual, which is being updated right now.
Right.
And hopefully will be published in the new year. And that, you know, that we're obligated to follow that criteria. Some of this comes from case law and from corporate counsel over the years advising road commissions. You have to make sure that you speak to this criteria in your bid solicitations. And we do that. The problem is it's complicated in terms of where all of this is coming from. And I think we can do a better job pulling it all together.
I just want to say thanks, Gloria, for bringing this to the board.
No, excellent conversations and ideas will come out of this. What I would like to see, and I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners, is what marching orders would we like to give our managing director in terms of coming back to our board, and roughly when, with some ideas that we could do that would make existing policies that are there more accessible. I'm in my own head, I'm envisioning a clickable button on our webpage, doing business with the Washington County Road Commission, which would be aimed at small contracts, would not be aimed at, as Gloria has said, as everybody has said, is not aimed at road construction. It's aimed at the other monies we spent. And I would very much like to see like I say, a little clickable button that would you could touch, and it would give the policies of the board followed by the practicalities of the board. These are the things that you need to be able to provide to the Washington County Road Commission in order to do business with us when we want to buy 10 wheelbarrows, when we want to buy hay bales, because we buy hay bales every year, okay, or straw bales as the case may be. Those are the kinds of things that are opportunities for smaller businesses, be they disadvantaged or otherwise, to be able to do business with us.
It's a great idea, Doug. Yeah. And I also thank Gloria for bringing this topic to light.
I'll remind the board, we have one employee here. There's 170 people or something that work for the road commission. There's one of them that works for the board. Okay, and only one. The rest of them are exempt. They can listen to us, but the managing director is the only one we make the decisions about. So we need to give the managing director, I think, some guidance here. Would it be reasonable, Cheryl, this is a question for you, for you to come back to the board at a working session in February, knowing that we're going to lose some time over the holidays here, okay, with some things that would get towards the goal of making us more accessible to smaller enterprises? Would that be a reasonable goal for you?
Yes, February I think is a reasonable time frame. And if I may, if Emily could possibly share her screen, I just want to show you what we currently have. And we acknowledge the fact that it needs improvement, and this conversation has been very helpful for ideas on how to better improve. But as you can, this is our current website, and we actually do have a tab for doing business with WCRC.
We do, yeah. So, yep. So what you can see here is what we currently have on the website. So here, I'll go to the homepage. I was loaded up for our next topic. So this is our homepage. So we do have and we reformatted this about a year or so ago. And so we've got this doing business with WCRC, and then we have this procurement page right on top. And I think that this is where we can make some of the improvements that we've been talking about today. And there's a lot of things we can do. This is an improvement to what we had about a year ago. But there are always more we can do in web development and more accessibility things we can do. But you'll see we've got a part about goods and services, and then we also have about construction itself. And so giving some examples about going through BidNet, there's links here, explanations here, and then about our professional services. And again, we can expand upon any of this, but then we also have our recent advertisements. So these are individual posts that we put out there that describe exactly what is being bid and then how to find that information. So like here's an advertisement to bid for various materials for 2021. We just posted this in October, and then it gives you how you can submit. I think what's missing from here, what I've been hearing from you all, is it doesn't really talk about what the requirements are of the bidders, because my understanding is all of that information is involved once you get into the bid documents, but the bid documents themselves are not right here on this posting. So there's, I think, definitely things we can do, but I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what how we have it posted right now. And then you can see all the various ads to bid that we have had, or invitations to bid down here in this section, and click on whichever one you're interested in.
So, and through the chair, and I think this is part of where I started to get through this, and a business tried to get in here and could not because they went to
get into BidNet.
Right, and BidNet didn't allow them in, and they had to register their business, and they had difficulty registering their business. And so the responsibility contracting language has been vetted by an attorney to ensure that it doesn't violate any of the laws. PA 105 specifically, that speaks to the road construction, Jim. So I wanted us to, and I understand that it is a very cumbersome policy that they took on because they included their process along with their policy. So I know that this is a heavy lift, Cheryl, and I said that I would help, and you were like, nope, don't need you, but I believe that we need something where all the information is in one place, and I would like the responsibility contract language to be included in what all of our policies are. And the policy is broad, and we can cherry pick this policy in place and decide what part of that policy ends up being procedure and what is not. I mean, as we had conversations before, some things that were commonsensical, which speaks to subcontractors and ensuring subcontractors are responsible also, and the policy put forth, I did find out we do have something in place, but this lets company knows immediately, even through that, if you're going to have a subcontractor, we're going to hold them to the same kind of standards. We're not going to take your contract if you have a history of not paying those contractors, and it will affect us. So I agree with, so some of the language I think is important that we keep. We don't need all of the language because it's not specific to us. And that's what I'm looking for. And along with Rod's concerns on how this can be. I know of all those spots that you've put forward to us. They still don't, it's still buried. You still can't get into BidNet. If you're too small. And I'm not talking about a $10,000, we're talking about 50,000 and more kind of contracts. So I guess that's all I want to say to that.
What I'm struggling with in my head, the way I do this longhand is I create a grid. Literally, I create a chart. And I will go through and I will list the criteria. And is the criteria included? Do we meet it? And then I try to determine where the holes are. and kind of an asset management approach, right? I mean, what's the priority of those missing pieces and how can we put them in place? I really appreciated receiving the spec contract for the Manchester Service Center, and the living wage section of that was really helpful to me. And the closing sentence in that paragraph was certified weekly payroll records covering the contractors and all subcontractors workforces shall be completed and submitted to the facilities supervisor. So I thought I heard at some point, Gloria, your concern about the subs. You know, you hire a general contractor, but you don't know what's going on with the subs. And I would be curious to know, does that address your concern? In terms of BidNet, I don't know BidNet. I've never tried to use it. I don't know why anyone would not be able to get in, your words, to get in, even to see what the criteria are. Do we have a checklist template where people, before they even try to bid, can say, okay, you know, I have these 6 things, but there's actually 8 criteria. So I got to take care of those. I've got homework to do. I have 2 hoops I got to jump through. Okay, now I'm ready. I've got the pieces in place. Now I can bid. Because my concern is the integrity of the Washtenaw County Road Commission. I feel like that's my job as a road commissioner, to make sure that the playing field is level, that it's fair, that we get what we're paying for, and that we do business in an open, even-handed way. And I truly believe our organization strives to do that. If we're falling short, if, as Cheryl said, sometimes when you're inside, you can't see what you need to do. So maybe somebody on the outside could give you some ideas or a different perspective. Bring it. You know, this BidNet thing was new to me, Gloria. MDOT pre-qualified, what does that mean? Frankly, is it our job to tell a prospective contractor what that is? We can say you need to be MDOT pre-qualified. It's up to them to figure out what that means. If BidNet has criteria, that should be front and center, and it's up to the applicant to make sure they meet the criteria. I mean, that's what I've always had to do, right? When I want to buy anything or finance anything or apply for anything, what do I have to bring to the table? And once I get that in place, then you can argue with me about whether you like the color of my hair or the accent that I have. But at least then when we're entering, we're all entering at least with that checklist completed. Right. And maybe that's oversimplified. Correct me, everybody, if that's too simple. But well, and I covered a lot of what I'm hearing in the bid specs here.
And I guess that's what the responsible contractors language does, brings it forward, and it's easy and accessible. And hence why, as I did research, if you did work with the state of Michigan, a lot of the language that's in the responsibility contracting language, people have to meet that. So it doesn't make sense to duplicate that. So when the funds come from the state of Michigan, a lot of what's in this policy is with the state of Michigan. So, and I get what you're saying about the grids and such. So the easeability for people to see and you're right. So when I'm entering into anything, I want to know, what are the rules?
Right.
And how are those rules? And I understand we have them all over, but they're like all over the place. They're not in one spot. And hence I know that we have that button, like doing business, and we click that thing, but it's, you know, you can't really get all that information.
And it sounds to me like we have 4 tiers of purchasing limits on the organizational policy for procurement that you shared with us, Cheryl.
Yeah.
So we've got 20,000 and under, 20 to 50, over 50, and then professional services. So, you know, is the checklist different for 20 and under? Right. Again, I've got a grid. I've got 20 and under. You have to hit these 5 targets. Now, if you're between 20 and 50, there are 5 more targets. And if you're over 50, there's 5 more. So if I'm bidding on something that's 20 and under, I know I don't have to have a 30,000 square foot warehouse with 12 great alls. Right. Sorry. Again, I'm trying to address what Rod and Gloria and Joanne seem to be saying, which is how do we make this not necessarily easy, right? Because if you're starting from a lawnmower in your garage, you're not as far ahead as KBK mowing.
Right.
But checklist, and then it's like, oh, you know, what is that? I've got 2 outstanding. What is that? Well, then you know what you got to do and where you have to go. Is that helpful? Is that addressing anything?
No, it's helping a lot. And so, I mean, what I'm hearing though are a variety of opportunities for improvement. One of them is the policy itself. And I think that we can come up with some revisions to the policy, some statements of principle that we can all agree on, and that as you know, as the board or as the road commission, it's how we want to do business, and it's how we want the type of contractor that we want to select, whether it be obviously contractors that are safe, contractors that are you know, paying their employees or treating their employees well, they're well trained. And I think we can have statements of principle with respect to the policy itself. And again, somewhat keeping that broad. And I think we can have a companion document associated with it that also then gets into very, like you were saying, whether it's a matrix or exactly stating what those criteria are. And I'd like to see something that is scalable, so that, and whether we use the same thresholds dollar-wise as are what are within the current policy, or we can do some research to see what makes the most sense currently. So that it's scalable, so that, you know, again, a smaller scoped project is probably not going to be as in-depth as something like the Northeast Service Center. So again, some of that is getting to also having it to be manageable for staff, because we don't have 170 employees. We have, when we're fully staffed, 130 employees, and that's not always the case. And we don't have a purchasing department. We have this as a piece of everybody's job on how they're doing business. So I would like to make sure that it is manageable for staff, because staff's intention is always to carry out the direction and the policies of this board. The other part that I've heard is, once we can all agree upon, and the board, if it, you know, likes the changes and adopts the policy, and potentially a companion document, is then how do we get that information out there so that it is readily accessible, so that when you now click on that doing business button, that it is very obvious on how we're doing business, and there's no questions as for, am I qualified or not, or what does it mean to become qualified, or why am I now having to dig deep into BidNet or whatever it might be to understand how to do business. So we can, whether that means we put sample documents up there of what they might look like, or explain better what some of those things are. I think there's a lot of opportunity for improvement on the information that we're sharing, you know, so that you do understand how to do business. And then if there's an opportunity to better promote who we are and how we do business, and there's groups that we should be accessing or at least notifying that, you know, that this is available, so that that broadens the pool of contractors who potentially want to bid us in the future. That's another piece that we can take a look at, and that has more to do with the education of who we are and how to do business with the Washtenaw County Road Commission. So I'm hearing a lot, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity for improvement if that's the direction that we want to go. Yes.
Well, I'm hoping that's the direction we're going into, to create a responsibility contractor policy.
And if it's to the agreement of my fellow commissioners, again, staff needs some direction from us, which means our managing director. I would like to see the managing director charged with coming back to this board at a working session in February with the proposals that she sees that are doable and achievable. So the conversation would continue at that working session. Is that agreeable to my fellow commissioners? Gloria, I see, is shaking her head yes. Barb, do you feel that that's an adequate way to move forward here?
Yes, I'd like to give Cheryl a little bit of time to think about all of that's been said today, and she may have a recommendation on what to put in front of us next in February.
I think
February on the draft calendar for the working session, its permit rules and regulation is currently scheduled for the February working session. If an additional working session devoted specifically to this topic needs to be added to the calendar, we can do that. We have done that in the past. At one point we were doing 2 working sessions a month, and now we've backed off to doing 1 a month. But this feels like a lot to digest and recommend. So I'd like to hear from you in February, Managing Director, but I don't think it's going to be wrapped up.
By no means. I wasn't suggesting that.
Okay. Jim had his hand up a few times.
I did.
Okay.
Just from staff perspective and executing your policies and the procedures of the road commission, something I'm sensing is a lack of familiarity with all of the procedures that we follow. And this is going to be interesting in how we can concisely share that. I'm unconvinced that the board as a whole is familiar as may be helpful with all of that. Case in point, our policy speaks to purchasing authority. As a department head, Dan and Matt and I can process procurement up to and not exceeding $20,000. I do that with regularity, subject to the board's policies and the road commission's procedures. We can go up to $50,000 for Cheryl, and we do that occasionally, and I'll bring forward procurement for her and PO authorization requests. If it's an emergency and a tornado hits and we need to move right now, she can go up to $100,000 per board policy. That's purchasing authority. And then, of course, anything over that's got to be brought to the board for consideration. That's different than dollar amounts in the procurement methodology. Things less than $300, pens and pencils and paper, that's petty. That happens, we can just get a hold of Amazon or Office Depot and purchase that directly with a credit card. Between $300 and $1,500, we've got to get at least 3 quotes. Those can be phone quotes. Those can be emails. And Jeff Mann out back does that with regularity. So that's materials, and that could be services that fit within that dollar amount. And I would be authorized as one of the 3 department heads to approve that. $1,500 to $15,000, now we've got to have at least 3 written quotes, if we can get them. And obviously, the department heads can approve within that frame, but we've got to have the documentation for auditing and subject to the uniform accounting procedures that are referenced in our procurement. Anything over $15,000, it's got to have publicly solicited sealed bids. And we use 2 online bid platforms for that. If it's road construction, it's in Bid Express. If it's materials and services, like we've been talking about, it's in the other one. And I probably just mixed those up, and I apologize. But Emily had shared the website, and you saw the 2 links to those online bidding platforms. So I just want to clarify, just in that category, there's a lot to this. There's purchasing authority that you've extended and limited, and then there's purchasing method, and that's derived from the uniform accounting manual that you've adopted by reference as part of the policy, the 300 and some odd page document that Dan mentioned. There's a lot to this, and a lot of criteria that is of particular interest to the board right now is spoken to in tremendous detail in that accounting manual. Somehow we got to bring that forward so everybody is aware of that and informed. I feel, as one of your professionals, I feel that there's an information gap. There's a vacuum here. But a lot of this is already in place. It's just not apparent. And I think that's the particular area where we need to do better.
Well, Jim, I think, and thank you for that. However, the responsible contractor language I'm talking about does not speak to and is not, won't affect those operating things that need to happen, because those are covered under something different. It specifically speaks to 50,000 and above. And I understand what you're talking about. There are two separate, and I guess since I got involved with that, I understood that. And I think that some of the other commissioners may also, but we're not trying to dig down into the weeds where we're going to have a policy for when you have to buy pencils, or when you have to get salt, or those are already within that. We're talking about something totally different. We're talking about bidding on the new center that comes up, the Northwest Center, if it wasn't there, on projects that we have. So I'm aware that there are policies and procedures already, on both sides of what you were speaking about. And this will not interfere with that or interfere with your ability to do business. So I'm getting the sense that's what you're concerned about, that is going to, or that the lack of knowledge that you think that we might have here has to do with that. And I want to assure you that's not, I am acutely aware of those differences. And I believe the rest of the commissioners are, but can be brought on to that. But those things that you're speaking about, this does not touch those things.
Thank you, Gloria. And Jim, for that matter. Are there any commissioners that have any reason to believe that having our managing director come back to us in February at her convenience with her thoughts as how we move this conversation forward? Are there any commissioners that have difficulty with that as a next step?
I'm in support of that.
Thank you.
I'm also in support of that.
Okay.
I am also in support of that.
And so am I.
Is that enough direction for you to move forward?
It is.
Thank you. Would you like to move on to the next topic on our agenda, please?
Sure. The last topic on our agenda is our chat with the Road Commission sessions. If I may ask Emily to bring up her screen. I believe it was the last working session, we talked briefly about this subject, and we had started this program with our chats in person immediately prior to board meetings back at the first of the year in 2020. And then obviously it was quickly put on hold with the pandemic. So at the last working session, we talked about, is there a way to resurrect the concept, but be able to do them in this virtual format and in a format that made sense for both the board and staff. So Emily, as is typical, dove right in, and I'll let her explain sort of the mechanics of how to be able to do this. But looking at calendars, I did realize it probably makes the most sense to just say, we will have available, and we'll set up an RSVP type system, but we would have staff, and that would for the most part be myself, and then we can put a rotating schedule of commissioners together that were just available every Wednesday from noon to 1. It's sort of like an office hours type concept. And then, I have already blocked that time out potentially on my calendar for next year. And then it's just an opportunity for an informal conversation with people should they want to have it. So Emily, I'd be more than happy to hand it over at this point.
Yeah, so thanks, Cheryl. So what I'm showing right now is just a graphic that we could use to promote this. It's an updated version of what we looked at about a year ago now, where we were talking about in-person meetings. And so this would be a virtual session. And I think logistically how this is best going to work is, as Cheryl mentioned, is through Zoom. And so it would be a different link than what we're using today for our board meetings. So that information is there. But the idea is that someone can RSVP in advance, and they could have a 10-minute time slot, or I'm sorry, a 15-minute time slot. I think it's 10, sorry. A time slot between noon and 1 that they could come in and they could chat with the representative from management and the representative from the board and have that informal conversation. I'll show you in a minute of what that RSVP process could look like. I think an RSVP is important, but I don't think it needs to be required. And so I think we would treat those who RSVP, they get first priority. And then if someone just wants to join, they can hang out in the waiting room until we've gone through all of the RSVP appointments and then let that person in for their time. I think that, you know, it could be pretty informal. So if there's only one person on the line, their conversation doesn't have to be limited to 10 minutes. But I think it's good to have general ideas of those appointment times. Think of it as kind of office hours, virtual office hours. So it would work just like our board meetings do now, where someone can log in from their computer through that link, or they can dial in with their phone and talk with whoever is our representatives for that day. There's lots of ways that we can advertise this, like we did with the original Chat with the Road Commission, through social media and through local newspapers and online magazines and that kind of thing, and also on our website. I've started playing around with what the RSVP process could look like. And so what I've got showing now is you can see, oh, can you see that still? Okay, so what I'm showing now is just what an event would look like on our calendar. So we have these, we have an event calendar on our website. And so right now, you know, we're at our working session, we're at our board meeting. And then if you go into January, I've got this one drafted right now. But this would be how it would look if we want to move forward with these. And then you can see we've got our graphic here, the time slot. This is a free event. We won't charge for your services. And then the calendar information here. And then this is where the RSVP would look like. So someone would say that they're going, and then we would get their email information, and then we would correspond with them. I could have Sam, our customer relations representative who reports to me, help to just coordinate so we can have an idea of what time slot they're assigned, and also maybe what topic they want to talk about so we can be prepared. But you see we've got, I've got one going, that's me doing my trial, and then there'd be 6 slots that you could RSVP for. And if you don't want RSVP, you would just hang out in the waiting room until it's your turn and we've gotten through all the RSVPs. So that's what it would look like. There would be a separate event for each week, so we would know who's RSVP'd in advance of each week and have that ahead of time. So that's the general principle of it. I think it would be, again, just trying to come up with a way we could offer these virtual informal sessions. So there wouldn't be a formal agenda to this, but I do think it's important to have those time slots so someone isn't sitting in the waiting room for 40 minutes until if they're 4th or 5th to go on the RSVP list. So is that what you all were thinking when we had this conversation a month or so ago?
It was, excellent idea. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, you want discussion on this now? We only have 3 minutes left. How do you want to handle this?
I would think we're going to have the discussion whether we have 3 minutes left or not. So,
okay. I have
go ahead, Barb.
Okay. Is this, first of all, these are not subject to Open Meetings Act. So they're not going to be recorded, which I think is important for people to understand.
Right.
And also, I assume then we're going to do Zoom chats in perpetuity, because if and when we can ever meet face-to-face again, this would potentially be face-to-face on a different day from a road commission meeting date. So I'm in favor of rolling it out as a Zoom format and keeping it that way, but also being clear that OMA does not apply to these conversations. And then I would also suggest that you have a civilian, someone who's not familiar with this website and doesn't necessarily interact frequently with websites, if you can find someone like that, to do a beta test. Does this make sense to you? Can you find what you need? I want you to go in and schedule an appointment and see how that goes for them. Again, Cheryl's admonition that if you're inside, sometimes you can't see those bugs in your plan. That's all.
Yeah, and my intent, I think that those are good suggestions, Barb, and we can absolutely do that. I think my intention would be also to have direct links to it on social media so that I'm not expecting someone each week to have to find the calendar, find the event. So it's, we can, by creating individual events for each week, it's something that I can direct link to on social media to try to help make that a little bit easier. This, again, just like our board meetings now, do rely on people having some type of technology experience. And that's the challenge. Another way that we will be promoting this, and that was our intention last year before, 2020 got kind of taken off the rails with our in-person chat with the Road Commission, is that Sam and the other members of the phone team, as they're talking with residents, they will have this as an option that if someone is they really want to talk to the board, or they're like escalating their concerns with us, the phone team can use this as a way to advertise it and say, we do have this weekly session where you can dial this number, you can call in. So it's not just people who happen upon it on our website. We're going to be using it as a tool to say, if you want to talk to the board, here's one way that you could do it on our, when we have phone calls with our, anybody calling the Road Commission.
I like the idea that you'll create a button. So that's a button that I could share with my neighborhood, right?
So there'll be a link. Yes. Yep. There'll be a link. So each of these events, as you can see up here, will have its own unique link. So if you know somebody that wants to register for the next week's one, this link is what you could share with them. And then that shows you all the information. We'll add information about it not being subject to Open Meetings Act. And then you can do your RSVP right here. So the posts that we do on social media each week will be linking to that event for the, that upcoming week.
Okay. Great.
I'd like to add to what Emily was saying. I know that during the time period that we were doing this, it was helpful for the phone team. And I think it was also helpful for other staff. I know we had a project at the intersection of Ann Arbor, Saline, and Wagner, where we had a property owner who was very unhappy. And this was a nice venue for that particular property owner to come in. And again, it was in an informal setting to be able to talk to a commissioner, to talk to myself. I think that it's been previously said that some of these people have already gotten answers from staff and they don't like them. But this is a nice opportunity for staff when they have a particularly difficult person who is not accepting the answer that they have been given, that they feel like this is, it's an informal mechanism of being able to sort of appeal the decision that has been made. Clearly, there's no decisions that are made during these chats. We try to provide a little bit more information, and if we need to, we may get back with them with additional information if we don't have anything for them at that particular time.
And I think just being a listening ear is a big part of these sessions. I think the other advantage of having Sam, who is our customer relations representative and our primary phone answerer, help to coordinate and schedule these, is that let's say that we did have the resident that Cheryl is speaking about, it was not very computer savvy. And so if that was the case and he wanted to make an appointment to meet with you guys, she could RSVP for him and work with him to get him a slot and help him get on. So I think there's advantages to having us coordinate that and try to help accommodate people who maybe aren't as comfortable doing an online reservation. We can work around that.
Good work.
So this is the direction that we want to go. I have already started to put a schedule together for commissioners. Basically, it's just, and I can certainly share it, it's just listing each one of you on a rotating basis. And then I would ask that if you do end up with a conflict, if you can swap with another commissioner and let me know, I would appreciate that. And then I know my intent is to just basically block that time out on my calendar. For me, it would be each week. For you, it would be once every 5 weeks. And then just be available during that time period. And we may not have anybody, or we may have people in the waiting room, and will be, a lot of participation. So,
sorry, this is one of Ruth Ann's. I think this is your final Road Commission meeting. before you retire from the Board of Commissioners. And this is an outgrowth of Ruth Ann's concern about, I mean, her words were, people want to be heard. They may not expect to have us move heaven and earth to satisfy them, but they want to know that they've been heard. And as a result of that, then Commissioner Rod Green said, what about coffee hours, or an opportunity to have a road commissioner and the managing director speak directly with the person who has a concern that's kind of thorny and doesn't easily resolve itself. So hat tip to Commissioner Jamnick and Commissioner Green, as well as Cheryl and Emily, for finding a way to solve this concern in a way that I think is really constructive. I'm going to have my cup of coffee and be ready to have coffee with who's ever tuned in that day. So I'm looking at it as coffee hours.
Indeed.
I have nothing to contribute to that conversation, so I'll be quiet.
All right, well, staff is done with the agenda at this point in time.
Fine. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Commissioner Fuller.
Yes.
Commissioner Green.
Yes.
Commissioner Yamas.
Yes.
Commissioner McCullum.
Yes.
And the other Fuller says yes. We are adjourned, and we'll see everybody at 1 o'clock.
Thank you.